Hello, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Brun, half a ton Mistrunner, a Tauren warrior of the Mistrunner tribe, and I am gonna show you how to tank one of the biggest dragons in the whole of Azeroth. Deep within Onyxia's lair is a dragon known by many names, one of which is Onyxia. That's why it's called Onyxia's lair. It's a tough fight to tank, but I'm gonna show you how it's done. Are you ready? The first step is to do the super long Attunement Chain. I don't have time, or the energy, or the care to explain all that. You could probably ask someone, it's probably written down somewhere in some book or something, I don't know. I'm gonna tell you how to tank this boss. Let's do it. Alright.
So the first step of tanking Onyxia is being prepared. You see up here, we've got Elixir of Giants for strength. We've got an armor elixir. We've got, what is that, mongoose or something as well. Going in, pop in Blood Rage. You want to generate as much rage as you can. I like to pull the boss around this way and then just back her up against the wall. Backing up is nice as a tank because you can parry. I know in PvP, generally speaking, you never want to backpedal, but if you turn your back to the boss, you're going to be taking a lot more damage than if you're facing the boss. So you can see the team is all stacked up on the square over there. It's a nice icon to use. It's also useful to have the tank marked as well, so if someone does get aggro, they know where to take the boss. For my rotation right here, I'm prioritizing Revenge, Shield Slam, and Sunder Armor. Trying to keep up shield block as much as I can. One of the nice things about doing a fight against one of the big bosses in a raid is they hit you really hard. So if they're hitting you hard, you're getting a bunch of rage just from receiving damage, not just from dealing damage. I try to hit Blood Rage every single time it's up. More rage generation over the course of the fight means more threat generation as well. You can use different things like threat meters. There's one within details that I ended up enabling later on. But this fight is notoriously buggy when it comes to that. Whenever she flies up in phase 2, all bets are off in terms of what those threat meter values are. You're just going to have to fight for it whenever she lands. This first phase is pretty simple. You do want to make sure your back is secure against the wall because whenever she does the wing buffet, she knocks you back. So if you weren't against the wall, you'd be thrown across the room, which is a big mess. She does a fire breath, basically just a claw attack, the wing buffet thing. The first phase is the most simple, and it's definitely the most boring for DPS. But it's a test of patience here. This is not a DPS flex kind of a fight, unless you're a hunter, in which case you can just feign death. There are partial threat wipes and full threat wipes. You have threat reduction abilities like Feint from rogues, Cower from feral druids, Fade from priests, things like that. And then you have the full threat wipes, such as Dying, or Feign Death, or Vanish. So the DPS right now is just trying to consistently chip away at the boss, making sure you don't pull aggro. If you do pull aggro on Onyxia, she's going to turn, cast that Flame Breath on the whole team, or tail swipe people. It just ends up being total chaos. So this fight is all about patience and stability. If you look at the threat per rage of your various warrior abilities, Revenge is a super good threat per rage. So if you have that active, it's good to throw a Revenge. You want to make sure the 5 Sunder stacks are applied to the boss at all times. And a nice aspect of communication with your raid is to relegate Thunderclap and Demoralizing Shout to one of your other warriors. The fight really is not a DPS race, so having one of the warriors take care of those abilities for you means that you can generate more threat. Each of them is pretty low threat on its own, so it would be better for you to spend your rage on a shield slam, or if you're Fury Prot, a Bloodthirst, that kind of thing, rather than doing Thunderclap and Demo Shout. In addition, you have to be in battle stance. to use Thunderclap. So for this phase, we pretty much always have Brunt tanking one of the caves and then an off tank tanking the other cave. We call them east or west, just because sometimes you can get turned around and you always have this compass up here in the top right to let you know which way is what. In the air stage, which is phase 2, Onyxia gradually flies around the room. Usually there's going to be a person in voice who is calling the safe zones in case she does a deep breath. So you want to be listening closely to that. If you have downtime, you can put some pepper on the boss, shoot her with your gun. You can also use Blood Rage and Jump Sunder just to try and get some more threat. And the key mechanic in this phase is the fireball that she's casting on people. The fireball is reducing people's threat. So sometimes guilds will do this fight to make sure every single person in the raid got hit with that, to make it easier on the tank building threat in phase 3. The really hard part of the fight is right when she lands. That's when things have the greatest chance to go awry. So we're going to see what happens here. For these, the whelps deal so little damage if they're coming out in these typical numbers. This is a Onyxia fight that I did a few months ago, but you really don't have to use your active abilities on these whelps. The strategy I've been going for lately has been to just use white hits on these and then use my rage to jump sunder Onyxia to try and build threat and stuff. So I believe I just resisted that deep breath there, which is pretty lucky. As the tank, you're typically not going to be one-shot by the deep breath, which is nice, but many of your other raiders would get killed by that. So she's getting low. Usually people are going to be making a call for when the land is going to happen. And she consistently fears whenever she lands. So you want to keep really close tabs on your options for being fear immune. That's Berserker Rage, which is R for me, or Recklessness, which causes your attacks to crit. You take a little bit more damage, but you're also fear immune. Onyxia doesn't really hit super hard against the tank. She hits hard enough that if anyone is not a tank, they're going to get killed pretty fast. But taking a little bit of extra damage from her is not really the biggest problem. The biggest problem is making sure the fight is stable and under control. So boss is flying around, building up lots of rage. You do want to make sure you're pretty spread out for this phase. Okay, the boss is landing. So I just pop Berserker Rage and Recklessness, kind of redundant. And then I switched to defensive stance here. One thing that I didn't do this fight, but I've started doing recently, is popping Rage Potions at key times. I do have Tactical Mastery with this spec here. This is a deep Prot with Impale talent spec. Currently, I'm doing Fury Prot, and with Fury Prot, you don't have Tactical Mastery, which means whenever you switch from Berserker stance to defensive stance, you lose all your rage. So what you could do, she lands in phase 3, you pop Recklessness or Berserker Rage, switch to defensive stance, and then hit your Rage Potion, and then you can start spamming your abilities. So Shield Slam critting is going to be a lot of threat, and then we did get threat with that big Shield Slam crit, so I'm going to try to back her up here. And the raid is trying to hug the wall so they don't get tail swiped into the Whelp Cave. And I think this positioning is a little bit off. I want to pull her so that I move a little bit to the right. But maintaining threat is the most important thing. The DPS here should be super light, almost exclusively focused on whelps. And for phase 3, she's now casting Bellowing Roar, which is her fear, at regular intervals. If you are Alliance, Dwarf Priest can cast Fear Ward on you, which is very convenient. If you're Horde, you can have Tremor Totem, but Tremor Totem ticks at certain intervals, which aren't necessarily going to keep you safe every time. And your Berserker Rage cooldown is long enough that you can't Berserker Rage all of them. You're going to get every other one with Berserker Rage, which I'd recommend going for. Another benefit of using Berserker Rage is you get more rage from receiving damage, so that's going to allow you to up your threat output. So I miss that fear. Want to be using Blood Rage as much as I can. Battle Shout is something that can be relegated to other warriors in the group. I end up using it a bunch myself. I would prefer to have it than to not have it. If someone missed a Battle Shout, then I'll take it up. It does some threat, but ideally you would be concentrating your rage on your Revenge, Shield Slam, Bloodthirst, Heroic Strike, all those abilities. And it's pretty much smooth sailing from here on out. There are some other methods where the two tanks will both stack in front of Onyxia to make sure that they're both top of the threat table and it can kind of bounce back and forth between them and it's no big deal. That is more healing intensive because you have to heal through twice as much flame breath damage. With these kind of pulls, if you are killed, it's going to be really difficult, if not impossible, to get back up to the top of the threat table. So if you are, say, a warrior and you pull aggro, you should have a macro that allows you to put on a sword and a shield. Stability is key there, so if you do pull threat, just let the raid know if they didn't notice it already so that they can keep you up, and try to put yourself in the same spot where the tank was previously. If you just tank the boss over where you are, kind of by the square was over here to the right side, then she's going to flame breath the whole raid and you're going to wipe. So maybe you didn't start out the fight as a tank, but if you do get aggro, you should basically try your best to hold threat. If you're a druid, you can switch to bear form. Other classes that can wipe threat with stuff like Ice Block, Feign Death, you know what to do on that end. But there's no need to rush for this phase 3 as well. It's very much an endurance fight. One thing that a lot of the healers will communicate to each other is who's taking a regen break. You get a lot more mana regeneration if you stop casting for 5 seconds. So that means sometimes, say one of the priests will say, all right, I've got the main tank for a little bit, you can take a rest. So one of the healers will just wand and regen for a little bit, maybe bandage people next to them if they can. So it's about a steady, controlled engagement rather than DPS race. Typically, we'll say that the DPS can open up right around this point if it's less than 10% health. You don't need to, though. You could still take it nice and slow. If you are Fury Prot, there is a difficult decision to be made between using your offhand weapon or using a shield. Fury Prot doesn't sacrifice any of your mitigation talents, which is really nice. The downside is your big rage ability, Bloodthirst, costs 10 more rage than Shield Slam. And you have less flexibility with no tactical mastery. So I'll typically be dual wielding for a lot of it, unless we have a bunch of people die leading up to it, and I really want to mitigate as much damage as I can to make the fight sustainable for our healers. That does mean that the DPS can't press quite as hard. But yeah, that's tanking Onyxia in a nutshell. Ice Block doesn't drop threat, it only drops aggro until you come out. But hopefully by that time someone is able to pick her up. She drops some pretty cool loot. The head of Onyxia has an amazing necklace for tanks and physical DPS. Usually the prioritization for giving the head to people is based on those rewards, and they'll go tanks and then physical DPS and then whomever after that. Veron was thinking that was live. No. That is a pre-recorded Onyxia fight. That was when we did it as Deep Prot. Deep Prot Impale, which is a pretty nice spec. I would say that if you are a fresh 60, going Deep Prot Impale is going to be the better call. I can just show those talent specs here for fun, if that would be interesting for you. Let's turn off the automatic scene switcher here so I can show that to you and I can click things. So we've got here warrior talents. So I'll show you the spec that I was for that video. We're gonna go all shield block, all toughness, which is armor value from items. Defiance is more threat generation, of course. You take 1 point in improved shield block. Back in the day, I used to take all 3, not really thinking about it, but if you look at this tooltip, allows your shield block ability to block an additional attack, so you block 2 attacks instead of 1, and increases the duration by 0.5 seconds. All you get from the subsequent points here is more duration. You don't get additional blocks. But if you're tanking, you get attacked so fast that the duration basically never pays off. So you typically would just put 1 point into improved shield block, 2 points in improved blood rage, last stand, very strong ability, improved sunder armor, concussion blow for the stun. You do have a decision here to be made. Do you want to go for improved shield wall for 6 seconds of basically you can't kill me, or more defense? I believe I went for this, but an argument can be made for improved shield wall, and I feel like you can't really say that that's a bad choice. One-handed specialization means more threat. I did get shield slam. And then the next thing we're looking for here is Impale. You have a decision here between, do I want to have more threat output versus more survivability? Tactical mastery is super good. Deep wounds is nice. You also get to Impale with that, so it's kind of a necessary thing to spec into. 2 points in Impale, and then 3 points in crit. So this I would recommend for a tank who's starting out at 60 and you don't have a ton of great gear. Once you do get some gear, especially a lot of pieces of plus hit rating, you can go for a Fury Prot build. I can show you that real fast. This is my Fury Prot spec. All points in toughness, all points in defiance, 1 point in shield block, last stand, and then all points in crit, all points in unbridled wrath. You're attacking with 2 weapons, so you're dual wielding, you get a lot of rage from this. Improved battle shout all the way, piercing howl, and rage all the way. Death wish, some dual wield specialization, flurry, bloodthirst, and then you've got a point here for fun. I believe I just put it into dual wield specialization for more threat. So this is a very, very threat focused build. For running dungeons, this build actually sucks. You don't have tactical mastery, which means you can't charge in and then spend your rage and switch stances and still have rage in the same capacity. You also have less burst threat. Shield slam is 20 rage. Bloodthirst is 30 rage. So when you're starting a pull, you're closer to being able to shield slam than you are to being able to bloodthirst. It also deals a really nice amount of threat. Bloodthirst does some good threat as well, but it really takes a Fury Prot warrior longer to ramp up to their top end threat per second than it does a Deep Prot spec warrior. So if you're not raiding as your primary form of warrior tanking, then Deep Prot is probably the way to go. Fury Prot does allow you to farm in the open world a little bit better. It's still not great, but it is a slight improvement because you have things like Flurry and Rage and all that. Yeah, this is basically the setup for figuring out how to tank Onyxia and what the viable specs for that would be. Been able to tank Onyxia with both of these specs. The reason you need more hit rating with Fury Prot is your threat is more dependent on your white hits, and especially your offhand white hits, which require a lot of hit rating. I've got some wrist guards for MC that have hit rating. There are Voons of Ice Grips you get from a quest chain that are really good gloves that have 2% hit on them. You could even mix in a leather piece if you wanted to. I think there's the Mask of the Unforgiven from Strathholm that gives you 2% hit. Those are all choices that you can experiment with. The way that you choose to tank should fit your playstyle preferences and also the situation that you find yourself in. So I wouldn't say there's one correct way to tank as a warrior. You should do what suits you.
And from me, Brant Half a Ton Mistrunner. Stay safe out there, stay hydrated, and may the ancestors watch over you.